mostly using React hooks. I think I'm about the fifth person to talk about React and PCF this weekend. I hope I will have a different angle and that you will enjoy what I have to show to you. Bit of who I am. My name is David Rivard. I'm a solution architect, senior developer. I work for XRM Vision. We're based in Montreal, Canada. I work with a bunch of brilliant minds, and we're having a lot of fun with the Power Platform. This is where you can reach me. I have my mail, my Twitter, my LinkedIn, and of course the GitHub, where you can find all the source code of what we're gonna look at today, and where you can find all the source code of the PCF I've done. And as Danish introduced me, I'm actually, it's quite funny because I always been more than of a back-end guy, and now I'm doing a lot of front-end stuff. I really fell in love with the PCF framework when it came out, and it just keep growing on me. And I have a lot of cool controls that I have put out in the gallery, and I always try to keep them updated every time Ivan or Scott post good practice things to do in the PCF. I have to go in the source code of all my my controls to keep them up to date. But I really try to keep them clean and up to date. So go and see them. If you have any comments, I will be very happy to have some feedback. And we will there's one of this control I will try to show during the country picker. We'll try to show during the demo that I will present later. So for the agenda of today, of course, I will have a brief introduction on the PCF framework and a bit of my thoughts on the PCF framework and why I think it's awesome. My angle will be to talk more about React and really how to integrate the React framework with the PCF reality. And of course, the main topic will be how to use React hooks to make these to make PCF controls. Of course, I will talk about Fluent UI. I think every presenters today have talked about it, and I have two things to show in the demo. We will implement rating control, product rating control, in which we will be able to see the hooks in action in a more simpler way. And I will try to demo the country picker control, which is a bit more complex, and that shows the value of using React to make good-looking controls. Speaking of the PCF framework, like everybody knows it, like almost all the presentation on this weekend were on the PCF. It's been very disruptive since it came in the Power Platform world. For me, it's the biggest paradigm shift in the Power Platform since a very long time. It gives you the ability to natively.
Kevin,
yes.
Kevin, can you hear me? So since
yes.
we are using the test account, probably there's a root cause for the issue, right? Okay.
Is it good now?
Okay.
Before you begin, just a comment for everyone. If you have any trouble or any comment, just paste it in the chat window. Please do not interrupt the speakers.
Okay, so Danish, everything is good? You're seeing my presentation?
Yes, David.
Okay.
Everything's looking good. I think
Good.
some viewers may need to disconnect and reconnect to Teams. It's a Teams issue. It's not yours.
Okay.
So it's appearing fine for most of the users. So sorry for
Cool.
disruption
No
there.
problem.
Please feel
I
free
understand.
to. Sorry.
I understand. So basically, the PCF, what it gives you is the ability to natively embed client-side functionality in the form, where before you needed to use HTML web resources, iframes, things like that, and it was never very good looking. We had a lot of work to do to make it work. Now it's natively it's native to the platform, so that's incredible. And for me, one of the biggest thing about the PCF is it's not only a developer thing, it's something that enables you can enable the citizen developers when you install your components. They can use these components and make magic out of it in ways that you might not even have think it was possible. So I think it's very a good example of pro code no code unite. And also the PCF community is very buzzing. Everyone is jumping in the game, and I think I've seen like in the last year things are really shaping up for the PCF framework. So I really like it. One thing, like if you see this magnificent control, that's very good. And when this is the marketing slide of Microsoft for the PCF framework, and the first time you see that, you say, oh my God, I want to make controls that looks like that. But when you go to the samples, you end up seeing code that looks like this. You need to create, basically you need to recreate the old DOM in JavaScript. So you need to think of how would the HTML look like. You need to insert some classes. You need to append the different nodes. So for me, it's very clumsy. It's hard to understand. My mind just don't get it. You need to deal with a lot of CSS. As I said, I'm a backend developer. For me, CSS is not, my mind just don't get it. So at first, it really took me a couple of iteration to be to make controls that are looking good. And this is really, it's exactly what React and Fluent UI will solve will enable you to do. So I will talk right now just to make an introduction on Fluent UI. Like if you're
Can you hear me?
why, yes.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was talking. Yeah. Actually, Canary, what happened is always parallelly the same skill set. So production IT will
sorry,
happen at the same time.
So Renga, sorry,
So,
I need
verified
to
and
remove you from
updated
the session
the
now because
ESP
you keep
as
on
well.
interrupting the session. So I do apologize. I don't know
problem.
what's happening there. He keeps on unmuting himself and talking. So sorry about that, David.
No problem.
Thanks.
That's the that's the joy of live session. I don't.
Can you hear
It's
me?
fine.
Hello. Sorry. Sorry.
My God. Okay, so Fluent UI. If you're asking why you should learn,
What's the question again?
My God. Can you mute the participant?
Yeah, he keeps on unmuting himself.
Okay, so let's continue. Let's if you're asking why you should use React, my answer to you, it's because you want to leverage Fluent UI. Fluent UI is it's a library made by Microsoft. It's a set of control and surfaces and icons. Name it. There's a lot of stuff in there, and it's basically it's the it was called UI Fabric. It's the fabric on which a lot of Microsoft products have been are rendered, and actually the Dynamics model-driven apps are made out of this library. So just for that, learning React I think is a must for any Power Platform developer these days, and you will want to leverage this this library. Also, one of the good thing is you can code your CSS inside the JavaScript. So everything is for me it's a no-brainer. You would really, I don't see why not using this library. Next thing is a bit of introduction on React. I don't pretend to be an expert on React. I've known this only for the last 6 months or so. I think Scott Giroux made a very good explanation on the framework yesterday, much better than I could do. One thing that I have to say is one of the good fit between React and the PCF is that it's the philosophy of React is that it's component based. So you need to split the UI in several multiple reusable component, and the fit with the PCF is that PCF is actually a component that you want to inject in a form. So there's no dichotomy there. It's, the fit is very good. One thing you need, there's two big concepts in that we need to understand in the React world is the concept of props. For properties, these will be like your input properties. It's the thing that you will inject in a particular control, and these properties, once injected, are immutable. You cannot change them, and you can re-inject a new set of properties, but you can, once they're inside the component, they are immutable. And on the other side, there's the state. The state is something that is inside a component, and it's the living part of your component. So it's the different variables, different things that will change in your component during the life cycle of your component. And also for me, that one thing that I really like about React is the GSX element. GSX is it's a new kind of file. It's not the .gs file. It's .gsx or .tsx when you work in TypeScript. But the clever thing about the GSX is it's a mix of HTML-like notation and JavaScript. So in the same file, you can have all your JavaScript logic, and on the render, the return of your function or the rendering method, you will have these kind of HTML-like tags where you can inject some variables or some logic in there. So for those of you who come from the MVC, ASP.NET MVC world, it's kind of like the razor notation where you inject C# in HTML templates. It's kind of this. You can make the parallel with that. One thing you need to know is, and that's the biggest learning curve of React, is really knowing the life cycle of the life cycle of a component, and what renders or not the virtual DOM to the actual DOM. Other than that, the learning curve is quite low compared to other framework. You only need to know if you know JavaScript and HTML, you will be a good React developer. It's just a matter of knowing the life cycle of the components. And as you see, there's some methods that you can hook to, like component did mount, component did update. These are methods that when you extend a React class, that you can extend these methods and go and inject some code in these different life cycle phases. And the goal of React is to once it rendered the first rendering is called the mounting, and after that, once a component is mounted, it can receive new properties. It can you can set the state, you can force the update, and these will every time this kind of event occur, it will cause a re-render. And React is clever enough to render only what is needed and send what has changed to the browser. So that's the main philosophy of React. There are two kind of components. The first one being the class component, which is the classical way of doing React. This is the more complex component where you need to extend a class called React component. when you extend this class, you need to provide a constructor. There's a bit of ceremony here to hook the properties and set the state. And as you see here, you have a different, you have different kind of methods that you can hook, where you can put some of your code during the life cycle of a component. And on the other side, there's what we call the functional component. The functional component will be the simplest thing ever in the React world. It's basically a simple JavaScript function. You don't need to extend any classes. It's a simple JavaScript function that return a GSX element. So what the functional component can receive properties, and it will display the properties in whatever template, GSX template you provide in the return function. So there's no, as you see here, there's no life cycle. It's a one shot. You don't use these function only for display. But this is what the React hooks will change. They will permit us to inject some lifecycle method inside of a classic function, of a functional component. But before we go to the hooks, I really want to showcase the pattern I use to integrate the PCF component with the React, with my React component. And the pattern I use is, there's a fantastic blog post by Aung Kang. I hope I pronounce it well. He's a Microsoft MVP in New Zealand, and he was one of the first to blog about React and PCF. And this was really my wow moment. This is where I understand. I was really able to get a React component working with PCF. And what we need to understand is we're injecting a React component inside of a PCF component. The PCF component itself has its own lifecycle methods. So we need, one way or the other, we need to be able to, when a certain event will occur in my React component, I need to be able to call the notify output change, so that the change that I made in my React component will bubble up to the form and be able to be saved in the database. So and as we said, when we inject properties in a component, these properties are immutable. You cannot change them. But the clever thing is that we're in JavaScript. So in JavaScript, a variable or a function is the same thing. So the pattern I use is in the properties that I will inject in my React component. I always have the value that are provided by the PCF that will render in my component. But you always have a function that will serve as a callback function to signal to the PCF that something has changed. So this property is kind of like a hatch between your React component and the PCF. So I think I will want to show that in the demo before we go to the hooks. I will want to show that pattern because I think it's quite important. The control we will do today is it's like a product rating control. Here is the manifest. We receive a integer value that will be the rating from 1 to 5. You have a max value because you might want to have more than 5. The user will choose how many slots are available. You can inject an icon when it's selected and not unselected, and you inject a color to have this beautiful golden color here. This is This comes from the Fluent UI. It's a rating control from the Fluent UI library. Just go and see what the code looks like. There's tons of information on the control. There's the how to implement the control and the interface that you need to provide to the control. So that's what we're gonna build today. And just to show you how we set up the things between the PCF and the React control. First thing you need to do, you need to import your npm install React DOM, and other libraries you will need to use during your development. Some other people talk about that earlier. In one point in our update view function, we will call React DOM, the React DOM, and call out our rating control. So the rating control is a file that you can see here under my tree. It's a TSX file, which is and you see the React the React icon here, which means that it's a React component. This more space. This control, the React control, implements Fluent UI. You have different things about Fluent UI. I will minimize the control for now because I want to focus on the properties. So this is the properties that I required for my caller to be able to render my my component. So I expect the rating, the icon, the color, everything. If the control is read only or mask, you've seen Ivan talked about that earlier in his session. And what's important is I provide a callback function to my control. So when something will happen in the life cycle of the control here, I will just call this function, and it will bubble up to my PCF. And the way we do it is in your PCF here. I declare it's a global variable with my properties. I put some default value, but I bind the unchanged method to another method in my class. That when I receive a notified change from the React component, I set a new value in my class and I notify the PCF control that something has changed. When this is triggered, it will trigger the get output and it will send the value back to the form. So that's the main that's the main pattern I'm using in all of my control. It works quite well, and we will go back to the session, to the presentation. So now let's talk about these famous hooks. What are the hooks? Hooks are the new. It's a new addition. It's been there for a year or two. It's kind of the new guy in town. It's new functionality that was added to the React framework that lets you in a way that it lets you write stateful components inside a functional component. Things that were not available before. Now you can have a whole component with all of your lifecycle method inside of a simple JavaScript function. So no ceremony, no constructor, no. But you still have to do. You have a lot more stuff to do now in your functional component. It's not that easy. There's a lot of gotchas, and for me, I think that this kind of notation, it's more readable. It takes a while to get used to it. It's a bit mind-bending at the beginning, but I can guarantee you that once you've tried the hooks, I don't think you will go go back to the class component. These are all the hooks provided by React. We will just go and see a couple of them today. We don't have time to go and see all of them. I'm not an expert. There's tons of literature on them and how to use them, not to use them. There's some confusing messages in the different. So you really need to take them in your hands and make them work to find the best scenario for your needs. The first hook that we're gonna look at is it's obviously what we looked in the class component is the being able to manage the state of your component. So the UseState hook is used to store these kind of value. You can have any amount of UseState in your declaration. So these are all separate variables. They're very useful for anything that you need to hold a value that is specific to your this specific instance of a control. Then you can use the UseState hook for that. This example, the notation of when you declare a UseState, this is the notation. You will need to get used to these kind of array variable. It's called array destructuring. Actually, when you declare a state hook, you put the name of a variable, could be anything you like, and the convention is to for the second part of the arrays to put the set and the name of your variable. The second part would be the setter of the first variable. And the way to use that in an actual component is first, you never set the value directly of a variable. That's why you need to provide a setter. That's how React is able to glue things up in the back end. So what will happen in this this particular code construct is that when I click this button, the counter will be incremented. This value will change, and every time, as we see in the diagram of the life cycle, when the state change, there's a re-render. So since this value has changed, there will be a re-render, and the count will be rendered to the user. So that's basically the usage of the UseState. Another one that's important is the UseEffect. I use this control for this hook for to signal back to the PCF. You will see in the demo, but it's basically to respond to side effects. Something happened in the control, and you will want to have some side effect. That's where you will put the code. Interesting thing to know, you need to provide a second part of which it's called a dependency array. If you don't provide anything, this code will be executed after every render. If you put an empty array, it will be executed only once after the first render. And if in the dependency array, usually you would put some variables, and this particular code will be executed only if the variables here have changed. This is what we will view in the demo. And be careful, these UseEffect hook are the cause of infinite loops. For sure it will happen to you. You really need to know how to configure them correctly up to avoid infinite loops. Another very interesting hook is the UseRef. The UseRef is it's very useful if you want to have a grab on a specific HTML node, and so that you can interpret the values throughout the life cycle of your component. It's not restricted to HTML node. it's very useful in that case, and we will see in the demo how I use it to overcome a limitation of the Fluent UI library. Like you need to think of it like an instance variable. So on this example, I declare a UseRef. On the first render, the reference will be put on that hook, and because we need to understand that there will be a lot of re-renders of this particular input. So when you refer to the input.current later on, anytime during your life cycle, you are sure that you will get the last rendered version of the control, the one that the user sees on his browser, and you have access to all the methods and members of this particular element. So that's very useful for that. Another one that is interesting is the UseMemo. UseMemo, you would use that hook if you don't want to recompute the same function over and over again, because there's a lot of re-render cycle in a function function component. Every time a function is recalled, the members are evaluated. If you don't want to reevaluate an expensive value, you can put that in a UseMemo hook and put a dependency array, and this means that this will be recomputed only if one of the two values have changed. So this can be quite useful too. Don't overuse it. I don't think it's good for every scenario, but it can be useful. Last slide before we go to the demo is it's called the rules of hook. When you design a function component with hooks, you need to only call the hooks at the top level of the function. You can never declare a hook inside of logic, inside a loop, because React needs to know that it will re-render always the hook at the sequence of the hook declaration is very important to React to be able to render things correctly. So what you do, instead of putting your hook inside the logic, you declare your hook and you have escape condition to not do the things that's inside the hook. One good thing one tip I can say also is that you can use ESLint plugin for the React hook. Scott has made a very good post on how to set up the ESLint for PCF development. You can follow the recipe, and then you just install this plugin, this package here, and add these rules. And as you type your code, it will warn you. It will give you some compile error to avoid falling in the pitfall of not following the rules of hook. So that's all I have to. That's all for the slide deck. So how do these hook? How do we use these hooks in a PCF control? So this is the code of this rating control that we're building. And as you see, I'm not extending a class. It's a simple function that accept these properties, and that will render a GSX element. Let's go to the render phase. I think it's like basically in the end, what we want to render is a rating control. This is the rating control of the Fluent UI. As I showed earlier, there's a lot of different methods that you property. These are the props. You see, like iRating props. So these are the props that are needed to render this particular rating element. So one of the first thing I do is I declare the UseRef that we talked about. I declare a reference to that that object. So I will later be able to access this object anywhere in my code logic. I have my icons that I get from the properties that I injected. You have the minimal value, maximum value, and this is the state of my control, which is the rating, which is the, you see now for this control it's 4. And we have some event that we can some event handlers that we can leverage, and we have the theme that we will inject to have the colors and the things like that. So I showed the UseRef. Now for this one, this is I'm using the UseMemo. I showed you that the UseMemo is it's used to calculate a function, but not to recalculate every time the component is rendered. So here I will receive I'm receiving a color from the properties, but let's say that sorry, let's say I want to have another color here and have red instead. You see, I did not press F5 and the color changed by itself. So that's a result of this this hook here that that will recalculate the theme depending on the properties that are injected in the control. And I use if you see here, when I on the console down there, I put some log. You see that the UseMemo is executed once, but here if I cause a re-render, the UseMemo is not calculated again. Again, this is for demo purposes. I don't think that makes a very big performance impact. It's I would use that more for a very hard to long calculating function, but it's a good it's good for the demo. Another thing that I'm using is the team from Fluent UI. They are providing their own, because you can extend the hooks. You can create your own custom hooks, and that's another of the big big functionality of the hooks. You can create your own. So the team in UI Fabric, they provided some of their own hooks that you can use. You just need to install a package, and these hooks are available to you. And this one, I use it. It's like I use it as a constructor, because you remember that there's no constructor in the function component. But if I use this particular hook, it says that if the initializer is a function, it will only call it once. So I use that to ensure that my icons of Fluent UI are initialized. So again, it's a good example of a custom hook. I'm sure I could do it another way. This is, again, it's only for the demo. This is the state. This is the main. This is the main hook of the whole component. This is the one that will hold the value of what we see here. And I have some, and you see that if I clear, you see that if I choose number 2, the state is changing to 2, and it bubble up to the PCF. I will explain more in the path of these later on. And what's happening is I'm changing the value of the rating depending on what I clicked. And I think, yeah, I will go this way right now because it's pretty cool. Out of the box, the rating control provide unchanged method. So when you change the rating, it will just and you see that it's a much easier function. You just unchange and you set the new rating that you receive as a number. But what happened is, what I want for this control is I want to be able to clear the value, and that's not possible. Like, and what I want is, if I go and click here back on the number 3, I want it to clear the value. And I was not able to do so, and that's the functionality I wanted for my control. So, and I checked on their website. It's not there's a bug, or there's already an issue for that, but it's not possible. So this is where we can use we can leverage the UseRef hook to overcome this limitation. You remember that we have a strong handle on the control because we add this reference hook. So what I did instead is I extend the onClick event, and this, for sure, I have a bit more code to do, but by using this this reference object, I'm able to get the actual value that was clicked by the user. So if you see here, if I now 3 is selected and I'm selecting 4, you see that I can grab the click, and I can see that the previous value was 3 and the new value is 4. So if the value is different, then I'm sending this value as my new rating. If the value is the same, I'm just put an undefined, which will clear my my field. And voila, we have a fully functional nullable rating control. One last thing for the effect, we need to explain the effect hook. How do we call back this new value to the PCF? This is where the UseEffect come into play. We remember that the UseEffect this code will be executed only when this value will change. So I have just set the rating in my click event. So this UseEffect hook will know that the rating has changed, and then I compare the new value to the one that was received from the caller, from the PCF. And if it's different, I signal back with my callback function. I signal back to the PCF that there was a new value. And if we look at the code, you can see that I noticed that I passed from undefined to 1. My UseEffect just got kicked, and I'm calling props on change with a value of 1. And you see here in my index, the get output is being called with 1, which means that the value is now in my form. And if I click on save on my form, the value will be saved in the database. So that's it for this control. I will do some cleanup because I don't want to have all these console log, but I will definitely put this control on the PCF gallery. If you go on my GitHub, it's already the code is already there, but I will clean this up and put it on the PCF gallery for sure. Another one I wanted to, we still have 15 minutes. Another one I want to show you, this one is a more complex control. It's the country picker. And I think I got the idea of this one during my Christmas vacation, and I spent all my Christmas vacation coding that. It was a lot of fun. Actually, what I want to do is we always have this country field on all the contacts and contacts account everywhere, and also I wanted a way to to have a control that can where we can have these different country where you can choose your country by and see the flag having something more visual. And also I wanted something that I don't want to put the data from the country in my CRM. I want to query an API or something that will bring me this data. So this is what we're this was the idea behind this this control. And as you see, there's a bound. There's two bound control, one for the code and one for the name. The country code is the main field of this control. And as you see, there's three parts. There's the globe, and when you choose a country, you will have the flag, and this info button will come up, and you will have some useful information about the country. Let's choose another country, and you see, like, it's very fluid, and the way this was implemented, if you go in the index file, it's about the same pattern as you saw in the control we just see. I will not like the goal is at every update view you need to prepare the properties to inject inside your country picker combo box, and after that the React takes the way. And for this one, there's actually if you see these are all different controls. There's one control for the flag, there's one control for the panel, and this gives you a way to when you go in the main rendering of a control, this gives you a way to have a very clean separation of concern. You have this is the virtualized combo box. This comes from Fluent UI, but these two controls are my custom control that are declared here in the other files, and I'm able to call them with this HTML like notation and inject the properties. So I think this for me it's very clean code, and it's very useful. And the way this control works is I will just put on more space. This control gets the data from public API. So if you go to this site, you will this URL, you will receive a big JSON that contains basically all the countries and all the information that we're displaying in the info panel. And what's important too is the link for the flag is there. So that's how I get all these different 250 flags, flag icons. And what's interesting is that I use, this is a custom hook that's called UseFetch. There's a lot of, if you check on the online, there's a lot of I can implement my own UseFetch implementation, but why not use something that already exists? There's already a package for that, and he has a funny picture here. That's just for that. It's worth a shot. So you just install this UseHTTP package, and then you're able to use this this hook that is custom. That's basically telling to go and get the data at this address and fetch me an array of country. And this one has loading, error, and data. Data is always undefined, but when you make your call, it will. If there's something there, I can be sure that it's my array of country that is there, and there will be a loading. The loading will be true until the data has been fetched. So what you can do in your main rendering, that you can have switches, and if the data is loading, then you don't render anything until the data is loading. And once I receive the data, I will need to populate these options. So what I do is, for this one, I use the UseMemo. I think it's a very good use of UseMemo, because there's this will be executed only when the data change. So when I receive the data, I want to construct my my options, my different options that I will display in my combo box. And I have all these fancy sorting stuff and fancy. So I don't want to re-execute that every time I call so this will be executed only once, and with the UseMemo, the value is stored in this this variable. And in you see that these are the options that I present my users with. So that's about it. I have maybe a couple of other things I can show you. And yeah, if you want to see how it looks in the CRM, then this is the review. You can see another good thing, that it's another thing you need when you program a PCF. You always need to think that maybe something will push back a new value. This is the same field, and if I change the value here to 3, I would expect this to become 3 also. So this is a bit of gymnastic that you need to add more code to get a hold on these events. You never know how the user will put the control on the form. Yeah, this one is another cool one. This one takes a date field and change it to a click box. So when you click, it will put the current date that you click, and you can save that in the backend. I can show you. Let's say here it's the country in action. So it looks very good in the form, pretty slick. This one is I think it's the 2 option icons. This is another one where you can inject some icons, and instead of having a yes no, you can show things like that. And I think the last one I can show, and this one I like. It's always a good demo effect. This one is the spark line control. And this one is a good example of when you design a PCF, it's always good to give a lot of options to your consumer. So this is the exact same control, but with different configuration. When you design the form, you put different configuration, so you can have different visual. So I think this is very cool. This is the same control with 8 different configuration. This takes a value of takes an array of value and display. display it in a Sparkline. And also another good thing I think is you can always think about pairing the controls together. This is a color picker that I took on the PCF gallery, and I hooked the value of this field on all of these control, and you can see that you can change the color on the fly. It's very responsive, very crisp. So yeah, that's about everything I had to show to you guys today. I hope you enjoyed.
Yep. Thank you, David. This is awesome. I mean, React Hook has been there. I wanted to, try so many things and never succeeded, to be honest. And I would call you a React Hook expert now. So I'm gonna look at all your controls and then see how you have implemented.
That's great, man. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks, David. So
thank you for the event. Thank you for the organization. It's great to have a developer only event. I hope there will be more in the future.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks.
This is one of the many.
Thank you. Bye.
So,
is there any question?
I don't see any questions, David. Yeah, no questions.
Cool.
Okay, so guys, if you like the sessions, then do fill in the survey, select your best speaker so that they get awarded, and also you have prizes for yourself as well. So go on to the survey. There's a Nigel Frank link in the survey link that I have provided in the chat window, and then you have to fill in the Nigel Frank survey to get yourself a prize as well. So one of the lucky winner might get some prizes from Nigel Frank. So go ahead and then put your survey. Yeah, Raz has added a link to the event survey and as well as the Nigel Frank survey as well. So fill in both. And yeah, the next session would be from my good friend Daryl Labar. He's always raising the bar, right, Daryl?
Always raising the bar. Yep, that's me.
Yep. Yeah. So he's going to present on unit testing. So we looked at Jordy's session about using FICXRM, and now extension to that is the unit testing end to end. So I really like putting unit testing in all my projects. I'm a big advocate for that. So